Let's talk about, speaking of decisions, we've seen a Swell season, part of the career. We've seen a couple movies. We've seen, obviously The Frames. And now we see Glen Hansard. And I was thinking about Jack White today because he's made a similar decision. Probably the parallel between the two of you is that, it needed to be the right time. And maybe you weren't even expecting to do it necessarily. Yeah. I know Jack White, he kept putting it off. He had other bands and other projects. Where did Glen Hansard record fit into the mix all of a sudden?
Well, I think very similarly, actually. I remember I was sitting at a dinner table in Iceland in Reykjavik with the Swell season, and we were all sitting there, and it was the last night of the tour. And we had finished our show, and we were sitting there, and I said, you know what, guys, I really, this is the time I need, because there was nothing else. It was the end of the Strict Joy sort of period of touring. And I said, I think I'm going to take a year. I think I need to take a year where I'm not touring, and I think I need to take a year away from being around all of you and just be alone and go hang out. And it was great. The boys in the band were great. Marketta was great. They were all like, look, because they know that I'm not very good at resting.
Right.
So they were like, we absolutely, completely buy that and support that as long as you promise to actually rest.
Right.
And don't go working,
Whoops.
Yeah. And of course I took some time off and I went and hung out with my mother and I did a bit of carpentry, which is something I've been interested in for a long time, and got really excited about being in Ireland. And then I rented a flat in New York and went and hung out there, and there was a session one night. My friend Thomas Bartlett has this great session, the Burgundy Stain sessions in Le Poisson Rouge on Bleecker Street. And I went down and, his band are all ringers. And it was, he said, Glenn, do you want to get up? And I was like, yeah, I've got this kind of song. So it's in E, and it's got a bit of a sort of, Don't Do It by the band groove. There's a C-sharp minor in it, Watch Me for the Change. And yeah. So we started playing, and the boys just nailed it.
Nice.
They just and afterwards, I was saying to Thomas, I was like, "Man, thanks for that. I really needed that.
Right.
It just felt really good." And I said, "Is there a studio that we could just take that one song and go in and just put it down and just because I'd like to live with it and see if maybe I can make it a better song. Just to put it down on tape would be really great."
Right.
So we went into a studio a couple of days later, and we did 7 songs that day, and I was like, shit, this feels great. And it was just like being on holidays. It wasn't at all.
Are these the songs that we end up hearing, or is that was the beginning?
The whole 7 songs that we recorded that day are
there. They
are on the record.
How about that?
And they're all like, and what I loved about it is they're all loose takes where people are kind of getting it together, and there's definitely a sort of a looseness to it that I really enjoyed. Like a song like Maybe Not Tonight is just like, it's hung together on 2 chords, and I had a bit of a vocal that I'd been writing that day, and I was just really excited about this idea of, I've never written a song and recorded it on the same day.
Right.
And I did it on this record, and I was like, that's amazing. It's not even important that the song's that good. What's amazing is that I achieved this, to have the idea, the emotion, to go in, play with a bunch of guys who know exactly what they're doing, and play the song from start to finish. It felt like what it must have been like when Dylan was doing tracks on Blonde on Blonde.
That's funny.
Because I'm sure he was just lashing through some of them. I'm sure he was just writing the lyric and flying through it. And you can really feel that energy on his records. Now, I don't ever want to compare what I'm doing to that period. But in terms of the energy, it might be similar in just sort of the creative energy of it.
It's interesting. We had a fellow from out east, out Halifax way. His name is Joel Plaskett. And we asked him if he could write 10 songs in 10 weeks. And so he did that with us, and we would play each song each week. He would come with us, recorded, has to be done. And, he's like kind of a guy in Canada, right? Wow. So people were like, okay, I wonder if he can do this.
Wow.
So you did it all in a day.
Well, I didn't do it all in a day.
Well,
I mean, the songs,
I get it. You wrote it before.
Yeah, the songs were all sort of... Well, what happens with a songwriter, I'm sure anyone who writes a song will understand this. You've got like 10 pots on the boil. Yeah. You're adding a little garlic to one of them. You're throwing a little... And sometimes one of the pots burns and you lose it. And another time... so you're always working on a bunch of songs. You're never really working on one song. There's always... You've got ideas... And they're not even written down, and you forget them sometimes.
Sure.
Sometimes they just, and sometimes 2 years later, you'd be like, "Oh, what was that thing?" And then you find yourself playing the chords again and going, "Shit, I remember that. That was," and you're back with it. So songs are like these kind of ethereal things that are in your life, but they're not in your life. They're like tuning in the radio station. You tune in, and you're like, "Oh, I remember that." So here, play this chord D, and I think it goes down, it descends into it, and then yeah, and here we are, and then the band are just playing what you're asking them to play, and then before you know it, you're singing a melody, and the lyric is falling out. And there's something about being on the spot which makes the lyric fall out the right way.
We talked briefly last night about your super band, and I couldn't help but think about, Steely Dan would come in and they'd have their songs, and then they'd like hire the best guys to like come in and dress it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And you kind of lucked out here. I mean, talk about a roster of fabulous studio guys and people who've played with some of the great names out there, and that must have been cool. And I guess, like you said, New York guys, right? Is that the
New York?
Yeah.
That's what New York is. It's a city of excellence. It's a city where and certainly in my estimation, it's a city where the people who are kind of best at what they do tend to sort of gravitate towards that. I mean, New York is kind of the capital of Europe in a lot of ways. It's like it's a very European city. It doesn't feel American, and I've always really liked that about it. Even though it is very American, it feels European, and so you've got all these incredible musicians there. And Thomas, I have to put a lot of it. Thomas has this amazing collection of. But then I'd gone up and I'd done the Ramble with Levon with the Swell season, and it was such an honour to do it with him. And then I got invited back up and we jammed out a new song together. And those guys in the band came down and played on my record. And
so I'm guessing you're a big band guy. You were a band guy.
I just think what they did was just. I mean, it's funny because they really are. You can feel the band more than ever in modern music right now.
It's true.
They're like having this huge renaissance. And it's funny, Levon dying at the sort of peak of that is a very interesting thing. I mean, Levon is just like if you've ever stood in a room with that guy, he literally brings joy into everyone who's playing with him.
Yeah.
Whatever way he smiles at you, it just says, be your best.
I ran into him a couple times. He's a character for sure. I mean, all those guys are. I mean, I don't know if you've met Garth, but boy, oh boy.
I've never met Garth.
There's also an interesting and fun guy to run into. And of course, Robbie's Robbie. Well, let's go there for a minute because Levon Helm, a member of the band, obviously when they broke up, he had the band reunited without Robbie Robertson. And eventually he got sick with throat cancer. Came back, came up with a couple of records, and started these rambles in his backyard. These were concerts in his sort of barn-like atmosphere, and you were a part of these things.
Well, the Ramble is very much, they invite you up, and they're going to do it anyway. They have the Midnight Ramble every Saturday. So you go up, you get into the house, Levon brings you into the kitchen, he makes you tea.
Right.
There's some apple pie, and there's always some apple pie on the table.
And this is in Woodstock, New York.
In Woodstock.
And his place, Levon's place. Yeah.
In his place. And you go out to the barn, and the barn is it's also in his place. You just go through a door from the kitchen, and suddenly you're in the barn.
Right.
And you set up, and you sound check, and it's like Levon's barn, and it's like the most beautiful, comfortable place to play music. And his kit is always set up there, and Graham, our drummer, got to use Levon's kit, which completely thrilled him.
Right.
And so you set up, you play your bit of music, and you're already gonna do one of the best gigs you've ever done because you're there with them, with this incredible band, and you see them lash through a couple of songs. We all go back in, drink more tea, hang out, and then it starts.
Pressure or fun?
Oh, absolute fun.
Yeah.
Absolute fun. Because here's the thing, you walk on that stage, there's like 160 people in front of you, but they're all just as happy to be there as you are. So there isn't this element of like expectation. Everyone's just like, we're at the Midnight Ramble.
Yeah.
This is going to be a great night. So you go up, and it's one of those gigs where you don't have to put much effort into being good. It's just the room is good.
And did you guys have other people playing with you that night? So it was Levon and you guys, and was there any other guests that tagged along? Sometimes I hear there's like 2 or 3.
The first time we played, the guests, would have been more or less the band. The band was an incredible lineup of people. But no, the first time it was just him and his band, and then we all got up and did the wait at the end, which was just amazing. And then the next time I went, he invited me up to play a couple of songs with him, and he said, "Well, have you got anything new?" And I just threw out as a new song on the night, and Levon played it bang on. It was that same song with the "Don't Do It" groove, and when he started playing it, and it's funny, there must be a recording of that, and I must get it, because I know they recorded everything multi-track, and I wonder if I could get it and just take off everything except Levon's drums and my guitar and voice, and then rebuild it from there.
My gosh.
It could be really great, but we'll see. But it's there. But then he had the guys from Steely Dan sit in that night too.
Yeah, he had, I think, Donald Fagen.
Donald Fagen, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the album.
You will become. You will become. You will become.
Rhythm and Repose. Interesting name, bit of alliteration. Where does that come from?
It was a book. It was a book on shamanism that I saw and I read a bit of, and I really, really enjoyed it. But Rhythm and Repose to me just struck me really, really strong as a title, because I've been trying to get more and more into this idea of action and rest.
Right.
And what I've been doing for the longest time is just action, 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 and there's been very, very little rest. Rest is something you steal, or you take little bits of. And absolutely, there's a lot to be said for people who work hard. But what I noticed was I was beginning to become a kind of a shadow. I was beginning to become smoky instead of solid. And that was when I said to the band, I need to take a year off. So the word repose, I wanted to just say repose, but repose kind of sounded too arty and too sort of like, repose. But I really wanted, but also I wanted to acknowledge what the work is. So what I've been trying to do in my life, I'm 42. I've just turned 42, and honestly, this means a lot in terms of my headspace, because what I've been trying to do lately is work hard, and when I take time off, turn off my phone, don't respond to any emails. I'm literally just working on wood, hanging out with my family, making dinners. I'm like, I literally, it's almost difficult to do.
How's it working out for you?
It's difficult because it's a new thing. It's a new thing for me, because I started noticing everywhere. I was noticing kids at bus stops, or when a girl goes to the bathroom and the guy takes out his phone, and of course, what's happening? It feels like to me, like, and I don't want to get off on a big rant, but it feels like we're getting away from this moment where we just stare into space.
Right.
That moment where we just sort of tune out. And that moment is, for a creative person, is absolutely crucial. If you're not tuning out, you're not being creative.
You're not working.
You're not working. You need to just sit there and stare into space and kind of let your imagination rise. And so I've noticed that even kids at bus stops, they're just standing at the bus stop and they're on Facebook or they're texting their mates. And I think that's great. I mean, absolutely, it's wonderful that we have that technology, but at the same time, there must be time for just rest. And of course you do it in your sleep. But I feel that daydreaming has always been one of the most important aspects of living life. I mean, I remember it so well from school. I remember so well just sitting there and dreaming about the life I would one day live. And I'm now living it. But if I hadn't had time to dream like that, I probably wouldn't know where I'm going. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? I think you form direction in those middle moments. All I'm saying is, in the title is don't underestimate the drift. Don't underestimate the eyes going to the sky or the daydream or the fantasy. It's absolutely crucial. And the more you're staring at Facebook or whatever it is, the more you're concerned with your concerns are in other places.
The better part of ourselves probably all get that. I don't know if we're going to be able to stop. It just seems like, but I hear you.